Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Product Management View webinar series. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Wednesday, July 13, 2011. I would now like to turn the conference over to Val. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Myra. To those participating through ReadyTalk, Twitter, and those who will be reviewing the webinar as a podcast or flash presentation later, hello. I'd like to welcome you to this new session of the Product Management View series. I'm Val Workman from Rima Technology Solutions, one of the webinar sponsors. And if you'd like to present a webinar, a series of webinars, or a topic, feel free to start a discussion within Grandview, send Brad an email, and we'll certainly do our best to get you guys on. The PMV is all about distributing the shared experiences of its members within our open product management community, and today the PMV is the world's largest free repository of product management recordings. It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome a rather large panel made up of folks from Cars.com, Redpoint, and perhaps Judith Glaser from, she's the author of Creating We and the DNA of Leadership from Benchmark Communications, may be able to join us a little bit later on today. This webinar will be a treat, and I'm very excited about it as we discuss with the folks from Cars.com about their transformation journey focused on greater health and agility. I understand that from their consultant side, they tell me that Cars.com was really a great place to work with, and they together feel like this is a great showcase for some of the things that Cy and the folks at Redpoint have been discussing with us about the We thinking and DNA leadership and some of the other Agile webinars. If you've missed those series, Cy has presented on these topics. They'll be heavily referenced, and they're being used in with Judith's works. Feel free to go back and download those webinars and bone up on those things as well. Highly recommend that. And they'll be covering some of the theory that will be showcased today. Finally, Judith Glaser has agreed to try to come in and visit with us and make some of the comments on some of the Cars.com's overall journey as well, and some of the efforts of Redpoint in their facilitation. For those of you who are using Twitter, you can follow and add additional conversation and questions using the Twitter hashtag #PMV throughout this webinar, and continue conversation with this webinar on the Grandview community blog afterwards. I'd like to encourage you to make comments and ask additional questions on this webinar's posting as well. Also, we'll be collecting questions throughout the presentation to address in the end of the session with a Q&A session. Please feel free to send your questions and comments to me in the chat section in the bottom lower left corner of ReadyTalk, and we'll try to respond to them at the end of this meeting. I'm going to go ahead and pass the control over to the team now to kick off this discussion on the transformation. Folks, go ahead and let's get started.
Thank you so much, Val. We definitely appreciate the opportunity, definitely appreciate the community's presence, likewise all the good stuff that Rima brings to the community at large. This is an incredible team of individuals here. The names are listed here. We'll definitely go through introductions at the end of the webinar, but without much more to say, I will hand it off actually to Clay.
So just to present a little background of what do we work on. So we work on Cars.com, that's our main product. We also have a suite of supporting products, a very broad view across the car shopping experience. We've been around essentially since '97. We have 13 million visitors a month that come and visit, whether they're exploring, whether they're buying, whether they're shopping, or whether they're kind of owners and enthusiasts. They come across all things, and we cover cars that aren't out yet, cars that will never come out, cars that are out, and cars that have been out a very long time. One of our big competitive differentiators that we like to hold up as well is our user experience. We believe that we have the best automotive user experience out there, and that was validated recently by independent Keynote.com report that found that of all the third-party automotive websites, Cars.com did provide the #1 user experience across the platform.
Excellent. So we'll kind of dive right in and really ask the question of, why do we approach agility, folks?
So, Jim Sanders here. So about this time last year, the leadership team in product and solutions and technology got together. We were assessing some of the information that came out of a recent employee survey, and a lot of questions around Agile. When are we going to Agile? Can't we do it? Why can't we do it? Along with some other interesting tidbits around our inefficiencies of some processes and related. So we got serious about it. We said we're going to do it. We committed to it. In the Q3 timeframe of last year, we began an accelerated vendor selection where we all acknowledged that we needed some help doing this. Similar type efforts in the past have failed, and with that, we wanted to bring in a very objective, experienced coach to help us and guide us through this. So at the end result, we selected Redpoint, and Cy and team came in here. And we broke it down into phases of which we're going to describe here in a minute. But basically, the things you see on the slide are probably not unfamiliar to most. So we were suffering from long delivery cycles, continuous resource contention, and a very finite pool of talented technology folks that were getting pulled in a number of ways. So in conjunction with that, as our company has grown, trying to scale this organization not only from an organization people perspective, but from a technology perspective, had introduced a lot of what we term infrastructure-related needs, and that consequently limited our product development and the investments that we were making on product development. So we needed a shift to get things out quicker to market.
And you mentioned, Jim, that employee survey where we really surfaced the fact that a lot of people at the line level were feeling frustrated by not being able to put out the things that they had imagined, for instance, the things that would make the site even better. We just couldn't get to them, couldn't get the work done.
Excellent. So exactly as Jim described, the approach that we use is very much a proven approach that we've really brought together over the years. And when we look at agility, the way we look at it is very much a value system focused on people, results, collaboration, responsiveness. And those are the key pillars that we build around. And when we talk about transformation, it's very much fundamental DNA level changing. And quite authentically, this is the team here that helped foster the transformation within CARS. And the overall objective is organizational health. You mentioned that in the beginning. When we think about organizational health, it really is a balancing act between performance and delivering to the marketplace, as well as the well-being of the folks involved in making that real. So those are very, very key. I'm not going to directly dive into all the details of the phases. There's a lot around those that's been written up on blogs and what have you. But generally, the overall pattern is we want to appreciate who CARS is authentically, their world, through CARS' eyes, and be able then in the second phase to establish a foundation for success, and on top of that foundation really begin to evolve and foster the success that happens here. All around that, we have this concept of a framework, and think about a framework as really a social object around which the team and the organization galvanizes. In that way, the framework describes how we deliver value and how we discover value, very much a way of being. You look at all the stuff on the slide and you say, gosh, Cy, this stuff looks very, very consistent with all kind of change management transformation approaches. What's the secret sauce? Well, Val already mentioned some of the key aspects of the secret sauce. One, there's three pillars around secret sauce that we definitely want to share with you. One is we're very cognizant that this is all about the human animal. So human nature is at the core of this. So we have a dear reliance on the concepts of creating we in the DNA of leadership. Likewise, tribal leadership comes into play, and most definitely there's an explicit coaching manual that really talks about the nature of dealing with conflict. And that particular coaching manual I'm sure we'll blog about downstream, but it is a fundamental pillar in how we do what we do. The second key aspect that comes into play is we're extremely essentialists, as we like to call it. Start with something minimal but holistic and grow it. And the team will describe what that experience felt like and how it was approached. And lastly, and this is a major one, we love people, but at the end of the day, we're also about business. So this has to be real. We have to be able to deliver, mix and intermingle the soft stuff and the hard stuff. Without too much more to say, I'm going to describe phase one a little bit before kind of having the team here really share sort of the experiences. In phase one, just a little bit of depth, our objective is to really energize the enterprise. If there isn't energy here, it's hard to, what do they say, bring the dead back to life? Raise the dead, there you go. So we really are interested in energizing, and the way we do that is authentically start with a blank sheet of paper and begin to appreciate where the organization is, where the individuals are. That's really that whole box. What do we appreciate? We appreciate the language, behavior, the structure, the processes. If you have a nuance of running down to Starbucks every 10 minutes, we have to appreciate that fact. That's a reality. That's one of my nuances, by the way. The team will attest. But nonetheless, we truly appreciate the folks. Then we begin to formulate, as a nucleus, begin to formulate kind of a to-be world, if you will, a vision, a very, very minimal vision, and then the nucleus, with the coaches, begin to socialize that. So as we begin to socialize that, that's a key word, if you will, we really begin to pull everyone and touch everyone within the enterprise so everyone gets a say as to the ultimate journey. And with that, we essentially then really have covered phase one in a very, very time-boxed fashion. Team, what are your experiences? What would you like to bring up?
I think Sai had mentioned the framework. And when we first got together to come up with the framework, we kept it very, very light, kept it very, very minimal. A natural tendency for folks within the organization is for them to request, what do you want us to do? Tell us what you want us to do. Instead, we went very light with it. We went the very opposite way. We went with just very light process, light descriptions of roles and activities and work products, knowing that later on in phase two, they're going to be practicing these items in the framework and experiencing them and learning from them. And then later on in phase three, and we'll get into that, they'll actually be owning the framework and modify it based on what they practiced.
Yeah, I would just add to that we going into this, we knew that we wanted to grow this organically. We had heard different pitches from different folks who had gone through similar transformations or different ways of doing this, and that we could. We'll hand you a 30 to 40-page document, and this is what you would do. And we thought that for us, it was important to let this evolve, let this grow in a way that would make sense for Cars.com. And by doing that, also help build buy-in across the organization.
One of the things is, this is Larry, one of the coaches, I found most amazing is watching the uncomfortable feeling resolve itself. And people stepping up and instead of saying, tell me what to do, figuring out what they needed to do and then stepping into that role.
So to piggyback on something that Larry just said, this is John. I was actually the product manager for one of the initial pilots we launched in Cars.com, and I had a team. I was really fortunate to have a team that was chomping at the bit to start putting this into practice. At the same time, it's kind of like turning all the lights off in the hallway and running as fast as you can down it because you really don't know where you're going. So even though they had the energy, like Sai mentioned, and they had a desire to do so, it was something that we as a team had never done before, and you really do learn by doing, just touching on the third point. So energy matters a lot, but at the same time, you need to realize that the first couple of times you do this, especially in the pilot phase, people are going to stumble, people are going to trip, and that's perfectly fine. It's part of feeling uncomfortable and being okay with it.
On what Jonathan was talking about, you have to remember we came from a typical waterfall style delivery model to a model where we're really talking about very minimal framework. So it's very natural of people to ask for a lot of details at the minimal framework level itself. But I think we stick to the minimal framework, not to get into the temptation of getting into a lot of details in the beginning itself.
Yeah, I think it was very important for our core transformation team here to get over each other and get each other uncomfortable in order for us to be comfortable with it. And we definitely pushed on each other a lot. Keeping a minimal framework meant if you were comfortable with anything we put in it, then we had not made it uncomfortable enough to validate it. We also, as people are running down that dark hallway, we're the ones basically saying, run down that dark hallway, it'll be fine. Yeah. And if we're not comfortable running down that with them in that uncomfortable state, then, that basically ground level leadership wasn't there for the rest of the organizational buy-in.
Yeah, so along those lines, we actually practiced what we
preach. So we actually used a lot of the techniques that we were promoting in the framework. We set up a scrum wall in the middle of the hallway where everybody's going to travel, so they could see exactly what we were going to be working on at any given time.
One of the things that regarding the idea of time boxing too is, as I gave presentations to places, other organizations or within cars, and John and I did a lot of this, I found that really saying the time box is one of the key things is absolutely true. People really, that's the key of this, is you get some kind of result and you course correct at the end of the time box. So that gives people the courage to move, well, I guess we'll carry the analogy. It gives them the courage to run down the hallway, knowing that at some point you're going to turn the lights on and see where they are, and then turn them off again and keep running after you know that you're pointed in the right direction.
And I think it was valuable, this shell concept. As we pushed each other to become uncomfortable, right, we weren't just a working group. We were an actual team that relied upon each other for the success of the endeavor we had just taken on. But that shell, as you're pushing out and banging into other parts of the organization and pushing uncomfortableness on them, you get a little pushback, and sometimes you need a couple buddies to come with you to help make everybody feel comfortable with that uncomfortableness. And that's not only horizontally across the organization, but it's also vertically down to the line level of the actual doers, and definitely up into the management structure of the org tribe.
And doing that, the cross-functional side of the team really helped us, because it's easy to go back to your own team, functional team, and realize the uncomfortableness, and as you come back to the core team and deal with it as a team together.
Excellent. Definitely, DNA is a messy thing, by all means.
So this is Mark, also one of the coaches, and really just kind of introduce Phase 2, which is our foundation. The objective that we're looking for here is really for the folks who experience the dynamics, really around the framework and a new way of being. So the socialization that we talked about, and that Clay and John and some of the others were just discussing, how they went out to the stakeholders and sharing this new way of being and really what was ahead of them. The big thing is the socialization really isn't enough. Really, they need to experience the dynamics. They really need to get running with it, start experiencing. So our role as a coach is really coaching the pilots to really help foster the dynamics, really letting them feel that shift, as Jim described in the beginning, where he said, Jolie, they really needed that shift. That's what we're really looking for in Phase 2, fostering the dynamics till we get to the point where we shift to that new way of being. The other thing we look for in Phase 2 is really renew how we create value. And it's really about harnessing awareness into behavior to get to the results, to really sum up Phase 2. So with that, we can pass it off and hear some of the experiences regarding Phase 2.
So notice one of the key things Mark mentioned very, very explicitly. Phase 1 is actually very tight, very compressed. We want to make sure the shell is either there or not there very, very quickly. So in a matter of weeks, we want to get there. And then going into Phase 2, beginning to build upon it.
When you hit Phase 2, this is when everyone starts coming to the realization that this is really happening. This is no longer just about throwing Agile buzzwords around and Scrum buzzwords around, that we're actually going to be putting people in place to make this happen. So there is discomfort, certainly, but this is the place where old habits begin to break and we start building up the new ones. And so this requires persistent coaching and encouragement throughout all of this discomfort. We really relied heavily on the coaches throughout this period. I can't begin to tell you how many times we heard Sai say to many people, hey, this is natural. What you're feeling is okay. It's okay to show some of that discomfort. So it's huge relief for the team.
I want to jump on that too, though, is that in Phase 2, we did so much coaching as well, where each of us took on a team that was doing a pilot, and we went to all their Scrum meetings. We went to their planning sessions, their reviews, and we listened to them get confused. We gave them our idea of how to get out of that confusion. We brought that back to the core team. We talked about it. And so these bullet points on this slide, I mean, we coached in addition to being coached ourselves.
Yep.
We took the feedback that we were experiencing as coaches of those teams and brought that back. I had, for instance, at one point, if I can use an example, I had my team of user experience folks using the term for our whole team and telling them, hey, now according to the framework, you are called analyst. And I'm talking to people whose titles are things like senior user experience manager or senior research manager, and they're all saying, what? I'm an analyst? And, this is uncomfortable to think that you suddenly have this real shift in how you say what you do. And so that was something we had to work through and think about, and, I don't want to get off too far into the weeds here, but really pushing the idea that's a role, not a title. Let's work through that. Let's make sure everybody's clear about that. So that was, I just want to say that coaching and getting that discomfort aired and worked through was definitely important that way.
So kind of a follow-on question, if I can ask, from the description that you provided, Jacque, people didn't have to buy into everything in phase one, did they?
I was really expecting a lot of flack from people when I introduced that. Hey, here's the framework, and you all are called analysts. And there was some, and there were some looks in the room that were, very uncomfortable. My own reaction was the same, but that helped us continue that dialogue to really shape the framework and change it in ways that made sense for this organization, for the people who make up this organization at this point in time.
So it's the conversation that advances us, not necessarily mere agreement that advances us.
I agree.
Oh, wait.
I'll jump on one more thing about coaching. So Jacque mentioned that the core team also coached some of these pilots. Actually, as a core team member, I was the product manager for one of the pilots, and Clay was actually coaching. So I didn't just coach my own team and my own project, which has really helped because the way I looked at the framework, the way I looked at implementing things was one way. But if I had just done that myself and also coached using my own perspective, I would have never gotten Clay's immediate input and Clay's immediate feedback and perspective. And it was actually really helpful, even though we're on the same core team, welcoming him in as a coach for me, even though we were both coaches together, was actually really helpful. So peer coaching across this core team was also really important, just gaining each other's perspectives as far as implementing the framework and seeing how to adjust.
Mm-hmm. Folks.
I think the important shift, one of the important shifts that really going back to uncomfortableness, and I still see it, and we're all coaching still, is this concept of push versus pull. And we were in a top-down, push-down, project-oriented, system. And then all of a sudden we kind of took away that security blanket of most of the people participating in the pilots. You saw that immediately in the first month. We took away the security mechanism of we'll tell you what to do and you just got to do it, right? And all of a sudden it became a participatory culture where you chose, can I add value or not? We broke down titles. We broke down the fact that this work product is only done by this organizational role and giant matrices we had. And you had people flail a little bit because they didn't know what to do, right? The whole freedom is slavery type of thing. Like, if it's so open, you're locked in, right? And it's really important to make sure that you identify the people that can get that early and help those people help the rest of the teams. And once you can get a team doing a pull mechanism, because it's no longer this is your task, it's you've chosen to say, consent that you can do that task, it's a very important shift. And once that shift happens, you're really going to have a hard time getting them to come back, and accepting any kind of push. So you just got to be a little careful if they don't go. You got to have a little push still.
Yeah.
Right.
And that also actually relates to the other point on here about grassroots adoption, which is when you are promoting more of that pull mentality, you're building more momentum from the grassroots level of the organization, of the teams. People are stepping up and taking on tasks. And it was just really important overall, going through this process, that this wasn't just a top-down activity. It wasn't just mandated, okay, you guys are all going to now do Agile in the next 3 months. This was really growing from the teams up and people getting excited about what we were doing and carrying the message around the building, saying, hey, I'm on an Agile team and these are the things that I'm doing. And other people were getting excited and people were saying, well, gee, why aren't I on an Agile team? When can I do that kind of thing? So, again, it's just really building a lot of positive momentum.
Yeah, I mean, we had teams opt in that were existing running waterfall teams on projects, ironically, that we had large discussions around the organization as sample projects you can't do Agile. That opted in and just flipped one day. All of a sudden there was another task wall on the wall. There was 15 people running around doing a giant database upgrade, which sounds crazy in 2-week increments. Just all of a sudden just hitting their dates where they were missing it for months before.
Right, and there's always, like Clay said, the teams, everybody on the outside is watching those first few pilots, and they're all really nervous, waiting to see what happens. But as soon as you have some successes to promote, like Clay said, there's a queue of people saying, I want to do this. This is really cool. Look at how fast they got this stuff out. Look at how great the team is gelling. I really want to do that. And it actually flipped from us saying we don't have enough pilots to now we have so many people in queue we need to start really picking.
Yeah. From a coaching perspective, this is the most exciting part, seeing that shift when we get the pull for new projects. That part never gets old.
I think the last bullet point on here is very important to understand. It's kind of an organizational uncomfort. We did have pilot teams that either shut down or blew up. What was interesting about it is the one team I can think of that actually just kind of shut down. We set them up in their sprint zero. They're planning. They did their release plan. They identified a resource that they needed and the feasibility and really the value of what they were planning to do. And then they just said, as a team, we cannot consent to delivering this project or this release, right? I mean, they just knew that it wasn't going to be successful so up front. I mean, in some ways, it was a giant organizational culture shift for the people requesting that work and up in the management tier to all of a sudden be okay with that.
And just to pile on to that, to get the actual teams to be okay with saying stop was a big hurdle. Shockingly enough, that the messages were all there and that the team was laying them on the table, waiting for somebody to tell them stop, when in reality they eventually got to the point where they said themselves it's okay to stop. So that was a big mind shift that took place.
And one of the overarching parts of Phase 2 is stress. Stress the organization, see where it's strong, see where it's weak. Without doing that, you don't know what to fix and you don't know what to rely on.
And as much as teams potentially shut down and blow up, we have emergence of leaders and of unknown talents all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
The contrary to that is, we had teams that just flew through stuff. And even if maybe they did or didn't produce a lot, but man, with those teams, those are people who enjoyed being with each other. They had ideas, they had synergy together. We didn't put that on this slide, but that's the opposite of that bottom bullet point. Is teams do thrive.
I think on that, the being uncomfortable thing and putting things in a time-box nature build that team chemistry and trust between a variety of roles. In the past role, it used to be a lot about negotiations and a whole bunch of contractual or documentation. Now it's all about the conversations replaced all that. Now people could trust and obviously faster decision making.
Notice underneath, if you listen tenderly, Val, you brought up some of the other webinars. If you listen tenderly, underneath a lot of this, there's a we-ness element to it. There's a tribal element to it. There's a triading element. There's a connectivity element to it. A lot of substrate. There's definitely a book behind these slides. We'll put it that way, from the journey that these good folks have taken.
And I think maybe the communication point that we have on this, we spent a lot of time in this phase talking with people as coaches and also as presenters, just telling people who hadn't been part of the journey this far what was going on. And I know for my part that I learned a lot about Agile and about Agile processes by teaching other people when I was presenting or when I was coaching. It's a good activity for all the members of the core team to do.
And you can also really gain some big promoters outside of the core teams. So I'll tell another story later when it's more relevant, but you'll find the more you communicate, you get buy-in from people that are really good connectors within the organization, regardless of whether they're high up at the VP or C level or really low on the chain but have a really wide network spread. As soon as you start communicating, you'll find that these people become promoters and really just organically spread the good news throughout the company.
It's like putting a scrum wall in marketing department area. You look at, what is this?
Good. Excellent. So a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of talk about teams, and there's a lot of talk about people and all these connections that are happening. The shift is real and very, very real and experienced. We get to phase 3, and in phase 3, all that goodness that's being really created, we want to make sure that it's embodied within the whole enterprise. So we want to ensure we're scaling all along, but we want to ensure we don't lose the goodness. So our objective now in phase 3 is to ensure that it's embodied, if you will, and really looking at it from, hey, we've shifted how we do good work and create value for our clients and customers. Now we want to go ahead and ensure that the appropriate oversight is renewed and is in place, and ensure that this nucleus doesn't become the bottleneck. So in doing that, making sure oversight is in place and taking, if you will, all the goodness that's being spread out and emanating throughout the organization and really ensuring it's in the hands of the different community members. So with that, I'm going to hand it off, but I want you to kind of listen, folks that are online with us. There's an underlying pattern. The team gains awareness. That awareness leads to behaviors that begin to happen, and those behaviors are really what begin to foster the results that we encounter. And definitely very, very eager for the team here to share experiences.
Yeah, this is Len. One of the first things that we did, and this actually started as a grassroots effort in phase 2, is we started getting communities together. So communities of roles. So we would take roles within the framework. So Jacque had mentioned the analyst role. We've got the standard Scrum roles of developer, tester, Scrum master, product owner, and we got those groups together just to talk about what they were practicing and what they were experiencing within each one of their products and in their projects. And we gave them just enough oversight to make sure that they were getting together and that they were able to talk to each other. We're still continuing to provide some sponsorship for it, but we're letting those things grow organically. So we're letting them happen organically, and they're able to really set their own topics of agenda. With this, too, we've also handed over the framework to the COPs and allowed them to take ownership of it. So each one of their roles is responsible for the work product and activities in the framework.
One of the additional things that we acknowledged early on when we elected to go towards an agile methodology was the idea of creating teams versus this project-centric type culture that we're talking about here, I think, in an upcoming slide. But basically, the notion that you're going to get efficiency gains, continuity, productivity by getting similar people together and feeding these teams work versus the continual dynamic of identifying a project, staffing the project, doing the project, collapsing the project team, and then doing it all over again. So the notion of having dedicated staff that get familiar with each other, they know how they work, they know their productivity, and can relate to each other, that was a foundational element that we established early on, and eventually reorganized ourselves around these dedicated teams. So to do that was very time-consuming, but well worth the effort. And seeing those teams now get some baseline information and actually see them improve in efficiency and predictability and things like that just further emphasizes the success of the teams and the value that has come out of it.
Yeah, and this is definitely the phase where you kind of let go of the framework, right? You develop these COPs to start growing the practitioners defining their work, right? And there's a couple things that will happen when you let go of the framework. One, the people don't understand that they can edit it, correct? They're used to just being handed, here's your template, do it, and they get to define what they'll do. You'll also have the opposite, where there's such a lack of, I used to have an 8-page template, and now I have a 1-sentence description of what the work product is that just clearly defines the value. You'll find some of the practitioners, in order to get back to comfort, recreating a lot of definition around things before they've proven it out in practice. And then this is some of that. In order to help that, this is where that peer coaching comes in. Just like we were coaching across the pilots, we started leveraging the pilots, the people who participated in the pilots, spreading them throughout teams as they rolled in through that.
So one of the questions that came through that we see in the chat is, why Scrum? And I think that's one of the things that we bring as coaches is really helping to introduce lots of different bodies of knowledge into the organization. So, it's not just, Scrum or XP, but really finding the best aspects of both. Certainly we have user stories and some of these things from XP. There's the time boxing and some of the other pieces that are coming out of Scrum. But also the Product Development Management Association, the PDMA. There's lots of great stuff that comes out of the PMBOK, and likewise the Creating We, Tribal Leadership, just bringing a lot of the gold nuggets out of each of those pieces.
The last bullet point on this slide is one of the more important questions, really, to kind of think about. When do the coaches stop coaching? And really what happens is you'll find the people just start pulling away from you, right? They stop asking you and they start telling you. And it's a wonderful feeling, right? It's your daughter pulling away from you on the bike after you've been running or behind her, teaching her to ride. So look forward to answering that question instead of worrying about how to answer.
Was there a conversation yesterday around one of the leaders wondering why their calendar was so available?
Right.
So authentic ownership.
Yeah.
Authentic ownership. Very nice. Anything else, folks?
Nope.
Beautiful. Definitely, as Mark said, there are a lot. You hear a lot of the Scrum terminology or what have you, but there are a lot of bodies of knowledge that the team really fostered here and the organization really evolved. Overall recommendations, what would you say to a whole bunch of listeners out there, what would you say to them taking away from all this?
So I'm going to start off with that top one, primarily because we went down this path before with another large initiative, and it didn't go so well, primarily because it was viewed as a technology thing. And one thing that we, again, established early on was that this is just not a bottoms-up how you deliver software. This is not just delivery related. We came at this transformation from a top-down and bottoms-up perspective, and forced the organization to really acknowledge that this is beyond technology and an IT thing. So that was a huge thing to continually remind everybody of, and a lot of the folks that look at Agile think of it just as a technology thing, but we squashed that as best we could, as often as we could, and then when we heard it.
And then so on the next one, we think that this is an opportunity really to drive empowerment and accountability. These are things that really go hand in hand with each other. There's always an element of management. Jim was talking about the dedicated teams. There's always an element of letting go from the management side, but I think management feels more comfortable empowering the dedicated teams if there is accountability that these teams are going to be driving toward overall company goals. And one key element of the dedicated teams is that each team has KPIs that align with overall Cars.com strategy. So while they are empowered to be making decisions on the product areas, they're also accountable to be driving their product areas toward these goals and always performing in that direction. And likewise, the product teams can feel that they're accountable if they receive that empowerment from the management team. Or put another way, it's hard to hold someone or a team accountable for something if they aren't empowered to be making the decisions. So like I said, these two things I think go very much hand in hand, and I think it's been liberating and really transformational for the whole product group.
So this is John. Like I said earlier, as a product manager, for me, communicating success was one of the biggest things for me. When my pilot team launched the first Agile release, it was still something that was kind of new to other parts of the organization that really didn't know what we were doing, like sales, marketing, bits of operations. And the VP of technology actually went into the VP meeting and said, hey, this is a really big deal. We just launched our first Agile release, and we actually had 18 months worth of tickets and bug fixes and just little things that have been put off so much, and this team finished it in 4 weeks, which is enormous. And a lot of people were like, yeah, I don't really understand what that means. And he said, listen to me, this is a big deal. We need, at the upper level, we need to start really looking into this and realizing how big of a success this is. And he actually became one of the big proponents of Agile, and it was just one example of someone that is a huge promoter that wasn't actually in the core team. And just by his word of mouth and his spreading of the news, it actually moved to different parts of the organization. And it wasn't just at the VP level. We had developers We had QA people, even people in marketing that were just like, hey, this is really interesting stuff you guys are doing. And by word of mouth, kind of viral marketing throughout the organization, when we started doing these pilots, people really started buying into it and asking us questions, asking us, the core team and coaches, questions, as opposed to having us have to go out and broadcast everything. So it was one of those tipping points like we talked about before, where once the word spreads, it's really great to see everybody coming into us as opposed to us broadcasting everything out, and kind of that transition between the two steps.
The fourth bullet point there, the maintain focus and don't bring presumptions or baggage, really speaks to a lot of experiences where you'll have a word, you'll have a certain name for something, and everybody will bring in what they think it is. Some of it's because it's comfortable to think of it the same way. But if you find yourself kind of presuming things or whatever, what you're doing is you're transitioning, right? You're just shifting from the way you do it. You're not really transforming the culture. Transforming is building a new foundation and rebuilding across that, where transitioning is just sliding over. And what you end up doing, it's kind of like a sloppy move. You don't throw anything out, you put it in boxes, and those boxes are going to be at your new place.
Yeah. Hey, Val, you're still with us here. Let me just tag on one thing. This is why you commonly hear us coaches especially don't use the word transition, but rather transform. Very, very well depicted, and if you listen to the whole conversation here, it's there versus going in and doing a transition. So definitely.
This is my favorite topic. So you will have to prepare for bad DNA to be exposed, right? If you've identified a problem, you have this problem that you need to, whatever problems it is, people are going to be succeeding in that problem space. So what you do is as you transform, some of this bad DNA is going to be exposed just by the change. Right? It's just go walk into the bathroom, turn the light on, and all the cockroaches scatter. Sorry, I used to live in New York.
But we love New York.
Yeah, we love New York. Yeah, no offense to anybody. So what you do have to prepare for the bad DNA, and it doesn't mean you have to start firing people or relocating them or anything, right? Some of it is just coaching. Bad DNA can change, right? You can help them out. A lot of it will be self-selective as well. They will no longer, basically be successful because there's this push. They can't hide under the push. They're now in a participatory culture. It's more exposed what they're working on every day. They can't hide for 2 weeks. And you'll see that happen. But we've had a lot of people, like we said earlier, that we thought, hey, that are just great performers now that were always tagged as an underperformer, right? We have other people that were viewed as, very good performers that are now like totally building back up to get back where they were, and they're challenging themselves to really, really participate in the culture.
So we don't address naughty DNA with more naughty DNA.
Correct.
Excellent. Beautiful. Anything else, folks? Anything else, folks? Good. So definitely from our perspective as just the coaches, folks online listening to all this, you really can hopefully take a tender listen to what the core team is communicating and sharing with you. I don't know if Judith is with us at all, or.
Yes, I am.
How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm sorry I was a little late, but I'm here.
No worries. Your presence is always valuable. Please feel free to share some of your thoughts, Judith.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking about is I heard everybody together, and I know some of the parts, but hearing the song being sung as a whole, what you start to realize is that when you talk about a shift or a transformation, what's really going on is that there are parts of our brains as human beings that get triggered when we start to feel that we're connecting with people around a higher purpose, and where we can see that we can add value, and where we shift from judging each other to connecting with each other. And that type of shift happens at a very organic level, as you've been talking about. That's what's going on. The organic really speaks to how our brains start to, the different dynamics of what gets created internally for us. So we develop this, when we start to collaborate this way, we're actually producing more oxytocin. And oxytocin is a bonding hormone. And the bonding hormone makes people feel comfortable even in the face of discomfort, because you're deepening a level of trust with people and saying, oh, my God, we're creating this new reality. Even though it's new, you're seeing this reality and I'm seeing this reality, so it must be okay to step into it. And so it's not about making mistakes, but it's stepping into this incredible thing that you're co-creating. And once you capture that kind of energy, it becomes so contagious. You were talking about how people just wanted to be parts of the team. They just wanted to be there. It's almost as though you can't not be there, and it feels so good. So there's this whole energetic flow that's enveloping everyone. The framework becomes as much a framework on paper, but even bigger, a framework of energy that surrounds the team's sense that we can do this. And that's really powerful and exciting to hear.
Judith, we have a code word for, I'll say, it's a kind of a code word that I use for it, and the team knows what that word is. And Jacque, what?
Oh no, don't put me on the spot.
Oh, come on, you know how much. You know how much.
So it's love, right? It's wanting other people to be happy.
Yep. That sense.
Dalai Lama.
But it's a wonderful feeling that you can focus on somebody else and end up getting more back yourself. So that's that abundance mindset. If I give it away, isn't it amazing that it'll actually come back bigger when I'm receiving it? So
and as a coach, seeing that time and time again, like I said, it just never gets old.
Yep. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Val, you still with us, my friend?
I am, and I know we do need to get moving with the Q&A session. So I hate to interrupt you, but my thought would be is just, well. Looky what we have here, folks. Over the webinar series that Sai's presented and talked about the we thinking, talked about the DNA leadership, and many times our community has asked questions about, well, how do we know this and how do we know when people are thinking we? And I would highly recommend taking this podcast or webinar and looking at it maybe 3 or 4 different times. And each time, certainly the content that the team has put together, incredible. And lots for us to learn just from the words you've spoken. But then go back and link it. I wish we could have little yellow stickies and put everywhere where you guys have set examples of the we thinking. I can't count how many times when you shared the I notion, it was always in a moment of vulnerability. And just as Judith was talking about, you were sharing a personal experience to generate authenticity. It just goes on and on. So folks out there, certainly look at it, try to connect it to some of the things that Judith has talked about in her book, some of the things that Sai talked about in the frameworks that have been shared. Lots of questions that we have. We're never going to get to them all, but we're going to do our best. But before I get going here, I want to thank the Cars.com team, Judith, certainly the consultants from the Red Point, and all the folks who participated today. We still have more questions and comments coming in. If your questions or comments haven't been addressed by the end of today, or maybe you'll have new ones later, and I'm certain you will as you review the books and the webinars that have been presented, feel free to post them on the webinar posting and in Grandview's community blog. The panel folks here today, other members of the community will respond. And so we need to get going. Kick off the question and answer session with a couple of questions. You've already answered one of them about why you chose Scrum. It wasn't really a exclusive selection, but it was one of many. Is that correct, panel?
What's that, Val?
You say that the reason you selected the Scrum methodology isn't so much you selected the Scrum, but you really picked and chose from many different methodologies. Is that really the way it was done?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we started with a grand survey of what we do, and then we really broke it down to what works and what doesn't work, and that helped flesh out, well, if these things work, that is like these methodology or this part of that methodology. If this doesn't work, if that's anything like that, we kind of stay away from it or really scrutinize it a little extra before we brought it in.
I see.
And even when we were selecting our vendor and our coach, that was one of the things that we were looking at, is by signing on and bringing in a specific vendor if they were marrying us to a specific methodology, and that was a differentiator for Red Point. That was very much based on our...
I see. What were the functions that we talked about?
Very agnostic.
Yeah. No, I understand. I'm very familiar. I can't endorse Red Point, but I hope you folks know that I really am enthusiastic as I can be about that approach as well. And so I'm glad to hear it. What functions were represented in the core team as you guys had talked about pulling the core team together and bringing in additional functions within the organization? Can you share with us a little bit about who they were and why?
Yeah, so we'll just run the table real quick. I'm Clay Johnson. I'm currently a director of product, and actually entering this, I was in charge of our user experience kind of front-end development team and was representing that interaction as well.
I'm Jacque Harper, right now a senior interaction designer. When we started this, my title was senior user experience manager.
Uh-oh, what happened?
You have no idea how many other responsibilities the fine man delivers to the table.
Yeah.
Jim Sanders, I run the PMO and project management, and now Scrum Masters.
Ah, nice.
I'm Manganaro, product manager before, product owner now. Not much of a change, except the big ship was having an awesome dedicated team now to my product, as opposed to the problem Jim mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, which was trying to pull in different resources.
I'm Jonathan Yenkin. I was also in our product management group, and now I am the owner of a product team like John is, and very happy with it.
This is Len Lagestee. I am the manager of project management and methodologies. When we first started, I was representing development. I was actually an engineering manager, but now moved on to project management and methodology.
I'm Mahi Inampudi. When we started with this, I was an architect, but right now an engineering manager. So on technology side, basically.
Right. So as you can tell, the organization has evolved quite a bit.
Right.
Nick wasn't able to join us today, but that is his real name. It's not just the car's pseudonym.
Okay. I got a few more questions I'd like to grab before we wrap this up. How much of you hinted at it, and you talked a little bit about it being light in phase 1 and phase 2, but how much of the framework was Cars.com aware of during the transformation process? Was it exposed all at once and then focused a little bit, or how did that work out for you?
Let me jump in to answer that. I had a conversation with Cy just a week ago or so, and we were talking about where that framework came from. Cy brought us an extremely lightweight framework. Some of us were pretty surprised at just how it was just, I think, 7 or 8 pages, maybe tops, defining roles and work products and process and just a lightweight document. And he brought that to us out of his head. It wasn't boilerplate stuff that he carried in here. He listened to us in phase 1. He said, here's what you guys are about. Here are the things that I can see you're strong at, the things that I think you're weak at. And he wrote this framework, and he turned it over to us, the core team. And then we took it and started reading it and socializing it, trying to understand it, getting rid of our baggage. That bullet point was aimed at me, by the way. And adapting it with our communities of practice. They're looking at it and saying, what do we need to do for us? And we've seen things where people have tugged a little bit. We think this is our work product. No, we think it's our work product. Okay, well, let's figure out, So it started very light. I think it's still very light. We don't even keep it in a formal form. We keep it on a wiki so that teams, the communities can go in and change it.
Hey, Val, to add on to that, basically we start with a blank sheet of paper exactly as Jacque is describing, and then we listen. We really, really listen. And from that emerges a collection of concepts that are shared and really coming out of the group, reaching into numerous bodies of knowledge and putting them on the table. I have a great sage coach, if you will, who's with us today, Judith, through her work, who really has taught us to listen. And that is very, very fundamental.
Okay. It's surprising to me, just to start. And you guys, I'm just really impressed. I'm going to interrupt again. Silas told me, he says, Val, this cars.com group, they're a potent team. I said, what? I can't really say that. What does that mean even? And Si, I'm beginning to understand. Just a more alive group is hard to imagine. Fantastic job, and we all have to sit back and say they couldn't always have been like that. They couldn't have always had such unity. And so a lot of the questions I have, I'm trying to pull them together into one group here, is they're asking, have you guys worked together as a team prior to this transformation initiative? And how do you unify the thought process to make this thing to the point now where you guys are alive? You can feel it. I've taught many university courses, worked in lots of different companies, and you guys are unique in the way Sai described you. You're alive with. So how?
Believe me, it was not always that way. I remember vividly the very first Agile Core team meeting that we had, and I walked out of there thinking we are never going to be able to pull this thing off. I think, if we could leave one kind of word of advice is to get through all the phases of forming a team with that Agile Core team, get through that storming period, and it's amazing if you can get through that, what can happen. And ultimately, just through time and trust, and ultimately we were able to start trusting each other, and then it just started happening naturally.
And Len and I were extremely new to the company. I mean, I was literally shaking hands with people in the room like, hey, nice to meet you. Let's get to work. So, believe me, this is as new as a team as it could be.
Wow.
Val, the nucleus comes out of approximately 1 to 2 months. Very compressed time frame. If the nucleus doesn't form in 1 to 2 months, then we're in a bit of trouble.
Well, how did you get sponsorship for this type of initiative?
One of the most important parts there, I think Jim touched on early on. Cars.com had done an employee satisfaction survey and found that employees were not happy about a number of different things, and this was identified as a way to address a lot of that. So we certainly hope that is successful. And Jim, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the key ingredient. One of the things, whether it be on the technology side, where it's frustration and the role in getting stuff done, and the tainted light that a lot of folks had of technology, didn't make anybody in technology feel good. From a product development perspective, we had product managers, product owners showing up on an annual basis asking for the same project year and year and year again. In fact, it was a long-standing joke that multiple projects have been on this project inventory list for years. So there's that, and management, to their credit, acted and heard it. So kudos to the organization for acknowledging and pressing forward with it.
Exactly. I mean, identifying the problem and agreeing it needs to be fixed was huge, like Jim just said, from the people at the top of our company, and being able to buckle down and say, you know what, this is an issue, and we really need to invest in fixing it. It was the biggest part of the first step.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You guys, I've got tons of questions here. We're out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in the Q&A session. There'll be a short questionnaire immediately following this webinar to collect feedback. Please take a few moments. Provide information that will help us improve our webinar series overall. Folks from cars.com, again, thanks a lot for sharing this with us. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Got another 30 minutes?
It's all about the folks here, Val. It's all about the folks here at Cars. That's really the key.
Communicate. You can never over-communicate.
You'd be surprised. I've got 4 questions about the communication. When did you guys start the communication? When did you communicate your dates? There's lots of things. Certainly the communication would be an issue. I appreciate that. Red Point, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add? Wrap this thing up?
Just thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Cars, for letting us be on this leg of the overall journey. The places you'll go, finish the title for me, forgive me.
All the places you go, right?
There you go. There you go. And thank you, Judith, for having such a foundational impact on the day-to-day things that we do, and likewise the tribal leadership community.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear what you've done, and I want everybody online to understand that it's something that's doable in everybody's DNA to experience this type of communication. So I'm excited about what other people will be able to do. It
is exciting. It's contagious. I don't know about the chemistry you were talking about, Judith, over the phones, but I want to play. I want to get involved here. Judith, you don't know me, but I am just very, very honored that you'd be able to join with us today. I've read both your books. I've made it required reading in our family, and it's certainly changed my life, and I certainly appreciate, and I know Cars.com and probably hundreds of other organizations across the United States have benefited from your work, and so really appreciate your being here with us and the work that you do in the industry. You know, I would highly recommend these two, the We Thinking, DNA for Leadership, 2 books I'd recommend to anybody. Anybody who wants to pitch in and be a member of the human race, get on it, read the books, and it's fantastic. Do you have anything that you'd like to leave with us today?
Me? It is that human beings thrive on being connected, human beings thrive on being appreciated and on being included, and when that happens, when those needs, most important social needs, are met, then all of a sudden we're able to rise up into a potential that even we didn't know we had. So I encourage everyone to reach to to touch each other and connect with each other, and even if the word love isn't something you use in your communities yet at work, but you find a word that equals that.
There you go. Well, thanks again, everyone. We're out of time, way over out of time. Everybody on the panel, appreciate it a great deal. Need to thank Ryman for their sponsorship of the open community. This webinar will be available in both the Flash and podcast formats on the blog post. Slides can also be downloaded on the blog post in just a few hours from now. Thanks again, and we'll hope to see everybody again next time in the Grandview webinar series. We'd like to turn the time over to Myra now.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our webinar for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines. Have a good day.